And I want to bring into the conversation Fiona Atkinson from the campaign group Just Stop Oil, who's listening to you this morning. Fiona, good morning.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Well, you heard Paul there. He's director of the Energy Transition Unit at Robert Gordon University. His view is that just transition is making a difference and will make an even bigger difference in the years ahead. Your view is we should turn off the taps now.
Well, certainly anybody, surely, who has been watching the terrible fires in Los Angeles and who also watched the awful floods in Tunbridge Wells, in the UK just before Christmas, surely there is a building sense everywhere of the need for urgent action. I mean, we've been warned for long enough. In a way, with respect to your caller, who sounds like they're doing fantastic work, but we have squandered the chance to go steadily. We need to focus on what matters to human beings, because we're now in a life or death situation, aren't we? We're watching the richest of people powerless in the face of these fires, and we know that the fires are man-made, really, because by burning fossil fuels the way we do, we have wrecked our weather systems, which is what has led to these awful winds out there.
Let me put that to Paul there. Paul, have we squandered the opportunity on this? Are we too late?
Nobody can change history. We should have done this decades away, but the starting point, of course, is what we can do point forward. There's a huge amount already happening, far more to be done. I agree with all your previous contributors around what more we need to do. But think about the changes happening globally. We have installed more solar in the last couple of years than in the previous 6 decades. Look at the kind of offshore wind. We've installed 50% more wind than we did a couple of years ago. It is happening. We need to do far more, and this requires the right global leadership. And it's really worth noting that there are leading countries here. There are 10 countries in the world who do 70% of the global emissions. The UK is not one of them. This requires global leadership, global commitment to make this change happen, and that is absolutely critical. Yes, I think a movement around the world to drive this is great, but actually it's the decision makers who actually can help, and that requires all of us to kind of align. And it is not just about switching supply off, because we still need energy to keep the world ticking over. It is about how we change our behaviors and how we line this up in the best possible way, so it is a just, fair and orderly transition. Otherwise, if we don't do it, we're going to get social unrest, and that's really unhelpful.
Paul, thank you so much for your time, your insight, your expertise this morning. Paul DeLue is director of the Energy Transition Institute at Robert Gordon University. Wildfires are still raging across Los Angeles this morning, with authorities warning the death toll of 10 is going to rise. More than 10,000 properties have been destroyed this week, and 180,000 people are still out of their homes, evacuated, in a disaster that insurance companies are saying could cost over $8 billion to put right. Scientists say climate change is responsible for the set of circumstances that have made these fires the worst in the history of California. And they're happening as new data confirmed that last year was the world's hottest on record, with global warming above 1.5 Celsius. That's a threshold world leaders had been determined to avoid right back since the Paris Agreement on climate change. As we sit here in Scotland, it seems a long way away, this, doesn't it? But we've seen the unprecedented floods in Valencia. We've seen rising sea levels around the UK, storm after storm in Scotland, and our 10 warmest years on record here have all occurred since 1997. So this morning on the phone in, is this the wake-up call? Do we need to get really serious about climate change? 08085 92 95 00 or 80295 if you want to text us on this morning. What needs to change? Whose responsibility is that? What are you doing to try and make your own difference to this? How worried are you about it? And do you think, Laura Young said earlier in the programme, climate scientist, that it's still stoppable? We can turn this thing around. Is that how you feel? Or do you think we've reached the point of no return with this? 80295 if you want to text us on this morning. Trish says, time for governments around the world to bite the bullet and make unpopular decisions to save the planet. Sellers should have to state items come from China, so you have the option to avoid them. in terms of the climate impact they have. Mo in Glasgow, it's very worrying to come across the wee insects that shouldn't be around at this time of year, but are flying about in the milder weather, then suddenly hit by this cold snap. Observing what's happening to these tiny species is our own sign that things are going very, very wrong. 80295 to text, 08085 92 95 00 to give us a call. Let's speak next to the BBC's climate editor, Justin Rowlatt, who joins us live this morning. Justin, good morning.
Good morning.
Just so we're clear about this, what's the connection between climate change and what we're seeing in Los Angeles at the moment?
Well, look, we've got to be clear. We can't say for certain. I don't think any scientific body has done an analysis of those fires in particular, but we do know there's a strong association between rising temperatures and a greater area of fires burnt specifically in California. There are various studies that suggest that. And yesterday, there was a study suggesting a kind of double fingerprint of climate change in what's happening in California. The researchers found that not only was the heat wave that hit California last year, record summer heat that dried the vegetation out. We didn't then get winter rains in October, November, December, which normally would dampen the undergrowth and make it less liable to fire. That didn't happen. But what's interesting is prior to that, we had 2 relatively wet years. Now, what that did was it allowed the vegetation to grow, so the trees, the scrub to grow. Then it dried out in the hot summer, and then obviously when a spark ignited it and sparked these fires, they're blown by the devil winds, the Santa Ana winds, which are seasonal winds in California. There was much more fuel then to burn the fire. So they're calling that climate whiplash, a kind of double effect of climate change, because our warmer atmosphere also holds more moisture. So there is a strong fingerprint of climate change in what's happening in California, although we can't say to certain the degree to which it affected these particular events.
Justin, you've reported from all the big climate summits, intergovernmental climate summits in recent years. They've all been focused on this 1.5 Celsius target. We now know for the first time for 12 months in a row we missed that. How significant is that? We'd
already breached the 12 months in a row. This is the first calendar year. I mean, I know it's a minor distinction, but just to be clear, this is the first calendar year in which we've breached it. There is a longer run of months in which the 1.5 target has been breached. Let's be absolutely clear about this. It isn't a technical breach of the target that was set back in Paris in 2015. That refers to a 20-year average. What it's telling us, though, and that should be obvious to everybody, is just how close we're getting to that threshold, the 1.5 degree threshold. Now, in a way, it's a kind of symbolic boundary. It's not an absolute, point of differentiation. But what the climate science tells us is that above 1.5 degrees Celsius, we're likely to get much more damaging effects from climate change, which is why that was the level that was chosen. But let's be absolutely clear about this. You're asking your listeners to phone in and say, is it all lost? Is it too late for the world? It certainly isn't. I mean, yes, we're seeing dangerous impacts of climate change all around the world, including, as you said, those storms early last year in which there was a fingerprint of climate change made 30% more intense by climate change, according to scientists. But every fraction of a degree that we manage to bend the temperature curve down to stop the world warming will have real impact all over the world in terms of extreme weather events and the average temperatures that the world experiences. And that will have consequences, will have benefits for human beings, make our lives easier, but also for wildlife and nature all around the world. So the more we can do to reduce the rate of temperature increase, the better it will be for all of us. So all is definitely not lost, and that effort that you've talked about all morning about trying to reduce emissions should continue. And I think to put a slightly more positive spin on it from the interview you just had from Uplift, I would say, look, there's incredible opportunities with the transition to low carbon technologies. These are huge new industries. This is the greatest industrial revolution the world has ever faced, because we're trying to retool the energy systems of the world, the biggest industry the world has, at a time when the world economy is at the biggest that it's ever been. So this is a huge global project that will create jobs and industries and wealth for people around the world, and will also hopefully help reduce the rate of increase of world temperatures. So there is a positive story about the opportunities that are created by this effort to switch to renewable power. But I don't disagree that it is a huge challenge. 80% of the world's energy at the moment is still from fossil fuels.
Justin, thanks for your time, your expertise and insight on that this morning. 08285.